Your phone screen flickers once, and you ignore it. Then it happens again. Maybe the brightness starts pulsing. Maybe the screen flashes for a split second. Maybe it only happens at night, or only in one app, or right after a drop. And that's exactly why this problem is so confusing. Because a flickering phone screen can be a small software issue, or the first warning sign of a real display problem. So in this video, I'll show you how to tell the difference, before you waste time trying the wrong fix. When people say, "My phone screen is flickering," they're often talking about completely different symptoms. Sometimes it's random flashing. Sometimes the brightness seems to jump up and down. Sometimes the display blinks, glitches while scrolling, shows faint lines, or starts acting weird only at low brightness. So the goal here is not to throw random tricks at the phone. The goal is to figure out what kind of flicker you're actually dealing with, because that tells you what to do next. First, ask what changed. The fastest way to make sense of screen flickering is to ask one simple question. What changed right before it started? Did the phone fall? Did the screen crack, even slightly? Did it get wet, overheat, or sit in direct sun for a long time? Did the flicker start right after a software update? Right after installing a new app? Or right after changing display settings? And does it happen everywhere? Or only inside one app? Those details matter more than most people think. If the phone was dropped, squeezed in a bag, cracked, or exposed to moisture, the flickering could be coming from physical screen damage or an internal connection problem. But if it started after an update, after a new app, or only while using one specific app, then software becomes a much more realistic suspect. So before you touch any settings, don't just ask, "How do I fix it?" Start with the simple fixes that actually make sense. Once you have that context, start with the basics. First, restart the phone. It sounds too simple, but a restart can clear temporary display glitches, frozen background processes, and short-term software instability. Next, take a quick look at the screen itself. If you're using a thick case, a poorly fitted screen protector, or there's dirt, moisture, or pressure around the display, remove those variables and test again. If the flickering happens while charging, or started after switching to a new cable, charger, dock, or accessory, disconnect it and see whether the behavior changes. Then check for software updates, both for the phone and for your apps. If the flickering started after a buggy update, sometimes the next patch fixes it. And if it only happens in one app, update that app first. If needed, remove it and reinstall it later. These steps won't solve every flicker issue, but they're fast, low risk, and they help you rule out the easy stuff before you assume the display is failing. Brightness. Adaptive brightness and refresh rate can change the symptom. Now let's get into one of the most misleading parts of this problem. Some phones don't flicker constantly. They flicker under specific display conditions. For example, only at very low brightness. Then only when auto brightness keeps adjusting. Only while the phone is switching refresh rates. Or only in dark rooms where the brightness is extremely low. That's why one of the smartest tests is to simplify the display behavior for a moment. Turn adaptive brightness off temporarily. Set the brightness manually around the middle. Then use the phone for a while and see whether the flicker changes. If your phone lets you switch refresh rate settings, like auto, adaptive, 60 Hz or 120 Hz, temporarily lock it to a fixed option and test again. You're not trying to guess the answer here. You're trying to remove moving parts. Because if the flickering changes when brightness or refresh behavior changes, that tells you the problem may not be random at all. And on some OLED phones, low brightness flicker can also be more noticeable to certain users than others, which makes this step even more important. This is where safe mode becomes really useful. If the screen is still flickering, this is where you stop guessing and start isolating. On Android phones, one of the most useful tests is safe mode. Safe mode temporarily disables third-party apps and runs only the core software that came with the phone. That makes it a very powerful question. If the flickering stops in safe mode, what does that tell you? Usually, it means a third-party app is the more likely problem. Maybe it's a launcher. Maybe it's a screen filter app. Maybe it's a buggy game, video app, or customization tool that started causing display issues. But if the phone still flickers in safe mode, that's a much bigger warning sign. Because now the problem is less likely to be one random app, and more likely to be a deeper system issue, a display driver problem, or actual hardware trouble. So safe mode doesn't just try a fix. It helps answer the bigger question: is this coming from an app or from the phone itself? Here's when I'd start suspecting hardware. At this point, there are a few patterns that make hardware much more likely. If the flickering started after a drop, happens on the lock screen, home screen, and inside every app, keeps happening after restart and updates, still happens in safe mode, comes with green lines, white flashes, black blotches, dead areas, or touch problems, or seems to be getting worse over time, then I would stop treating it like a minor software glitch. That doesn't automatically tell you which hardware part is failing, but it does tell you something important. You may be dealing with more than a simple settings problem. And if the display flickers, even while the phone is booting, unlocking, or just sitting idle, that's another strong clue that the issue isn't limited to one app or one temporary software bug. That's the point where continuing to toggle random settings usually becomes a waste of time. When to back up, reset, or get it repaired. So what should you do once you've narrowed it down? If the phone has no visible physical damage, and the flickering still seems tied to software behavior, apps, or settings, then after backing up your important data, a factory reset can be used as a last major software troubleshooting step. Not first, not second. Last major software step. But if the phone was dropped, cracked, exposed to moisture, or the flickering keeps happening even after the tests we just covered, then a factory reset is unlikely to fix a damaged display. In that case, the smarter move is to back up your data and move toward professional repair or manufacturer support instead of burning time on random fixes. Because a software reset cannot repair a physically failing screen. So if your phone screen is flickering, don't treat it like one giant mystery. Break it down. Ask, did the phone get dropped? Did the problem start after an update or a new app? Does it happen only at low brightness? Does it change when adaptive brightness or refresh settings change? And does it still happen in safe mode? That's how you separate a temporary software problem from a real hardware issue. And once you know which side of that line you're on, the next step becomes much clearer. If this video helped you understand why a phone screen flickers and what to test before you panic, keep watching Next Gen Gadget Hub for more simple, practical tech fix videos.